Good afternoon, Miss
Good
Latisha
afternoon.
Street. Can you tell me a little bit about your background in this field of the deaf?
Sure, I'll be happy to. So I have been a professional sign language interpreter from 2019, but the genesis of my story would have been when my sister was diagnosed with having hearing loss. So she was the hearing loss was detected when she was 7 months, but it could have been before that. And it was at age 5 she started to learn sign language. She's currently 16 years old. So we started learning sign language as a family back then. So I would have started learning really just to communicate with her. And so we could have a relationship and we will be able to teach her things instead of other people coming to teach her things. And then I started volunteering in 2016 with the Trinidad and Tobago Association for the Hearing Impaired, where I did clerical duties and any opportunities there were to interact with the deaf. And it was there I recognized there was a need for more interpreters. It was not something I was planning to do per se, but a lot of deaf persons would have, complimented me on my level of signing in the short space of time that I was there. And then, people will come and say, you're free this evening, could you interpret for me for this? Or sometimes they would bypass interpreters who are a lot more skilled than myself at that point in time, and they'll still come to me and ask me if I can do it.
Mhm.
So I said, okay, I'll try and take it a little bit more serious. So after during Dretchy, I studied with the a Caribbean Sign Language Center, where I would have completed all their levels of certification in sign language, and then I
Okay.
did the diploma in Caribbean Sign Language interpreting at UE, and in sign language, it's like any other profession, sorry, on ongoing personal development, ongoing training. So right now, training that I would have been doing is really international. So I so now the certifications that I have in addition to what I have in Trinidad comes from America, which is focused on American Sign Language, but the basics is the Trinidad and Tobago Sign Language and American Sign Language. There is some similarities, so it's a completely different language, but it's not like you're swimming in two completely different oceans. So um like for example, we use the same manual alphabet in sign language,
Mhm.
America and Trinidad and Tobago. So that's a snippet of my journey in sign language as an interpreter. I currently interpret at a secondary school where I work with students from Form 2 to 5. I am stationed with Form 5 students who are preparing for CXC at the moment. And apart from signing with students, it's for students at school. I am also an interpreter for TV6 when we have media briefings for the government, Ministry of Education, a lot of things, counseling, even like therapy, medical appointments. So I'm not limited, even though I'm specialized in education. I have worked in different areas. So
Yes.
my interpreting journey has been a blend of many spices, I would say.
Well, you could imagine that. So your sister pivoted you to all these different areas. You could have. I mean, when you were younger, you thought you would have been an interpreter.
No, no, that's at all. This was never on my thoughts. I didn't even know it had a deaf community that existed, a matter of fact. So
Okay. Hmm. The love for our family, yeah?
yes, so I say this career chose me. I didn't choose it directly.
Yes. Yes. So let's talk about the some more about the interaction and communication in the classroom. So could you describe the communication dynamics between you, the students, and teachers in the classroom setting? And are you expected to teach, or do you just interpret for the teacher who is teaching?
Okay, so I'll just cover the first part first. So,
Mhm.
as you know, as education sign language interpreters, we facilitate communication between the deaf students and teachers and even the peers in the classroom. So we would interpret what the teacher is saying and even sometimes the background noise. So if a child, says something abruptly or something might be inappropriate, we have to, um, by the guidance of by our best practices, we have to interpret everything that's in the classroom. So within the classroom,
Mhm.
uh, we interpret the teachers everything that she says, he or she says. We are responsible to ensure that the students we are able to interpret it culturally and linguistically accurate. So that's what usually happens within the classroom.
Mhm.
Now you asked if we only interpret or we are required to teach. So in a secondary school in Trinidad and Tobago, a sign language interpreter at a secondary school, most of the work is done outside of the classroom and not so much inside of the classroom. So yes, we are required to teach. It's not in the job spec, the job description, but we don't have a choice. And that is because the structure of the curriculum, even the teachers, they sometimes do their best, but they don't have the resources, and or even if they do, the time overwhelming for them, and they are not trained to deal with the students. So a lot of complexities lead us to having to
Mhm.
teach separately. So one of the major issues that we have is students coming in not being able to read. So a hearing child and a deaf child the same age, but level of language competence is completely different, and that is because they deaf students experience language deprivation at an early age. So they only have access to language when they are at age 5, and that is because Trinidad and Tobago does not, up to this day, doesn't have a ECC school for deaf students where teachers are trained to teach them. So any child between the ages of 0 to 5, any language that they would have acquired during that period was not at school, it was their parents.
Yeah.
And even though parents will try and study, a parent is not equipped to teach, because teaching is something that you actually have to study how to do. So yeah, you find parents doing their best, but they really don't have the skills and the resources that a teacher would have to allow them to have equal and quality access to education. So we
Mhm.
have this big gap when they get into primary school, and then so they start at age 5 in school, now learning the alphabet, now learning new words, and then you have a child who is hearing, who is 5 years old. Even if they wasn't taught, they were hearing words coming in, and they could identify, okay, this is a phone, this is a this. Deaf students don't have that that opportunity. So the problem starts there. So if you don't have language and you can't read, and then teachers at the school now have to fight to get them ready for SEA when a huge part of their language development was missing. Another issue that is there that causes us to have to, it cascaded to this point where we have to teach is that sign language is not taught as an official language in the school. So even though they go to a school for the deaf, there is nowhere in the curriculum where it says sign language. So they learn as they go. So they're learning English and sign language simultaneously. So they don't have a foundation really of the syntax and the morphology of their own language. So it's often confusing for most of them. if not all of them. And we have that gap there. So we who are hearing English, we know we have maths, we have grammar or language arts. So we understand that you don't say I is or they is. We understand, okay, so there's they are and they are. So we understand the rules that govern the language, but they don't understand this because it was never taught formally. So language deprivation, no corrective actions for that, and then there is no formal teaching of the language in the classroom. So they come in with all of that baggage from SCA, and they are not ready, and they come into secondary school where they have 13 subjects to do, and they have all these vocabulary that are missing already. And now we have to not only teach the subject, but we actually have to teach the language, sign language. So that's why I said that a huge chunk of the work is really done outside of the classroom. I'm underneath the Student Support Services Division, so we do have a senior special ed instructor assigned to the unit. However, that person does not specifically work with the deaf only. That person is assigned dozens of students with special needs. So we have deaf, we have with autism, we have with ADHD, apraxia, all the different students with special needs. That particular person have to work with them. So it will be overwhelming for that particular person to do all of it. So we are guided by that special ed instructor and any resources. And then another thing we don't have is resources for deaf students, so like textbooks and even storybooks in their language where they can build their vocabulary. They don't have a lot of those things available. So we as interpreters have to now work with other deaf persons who are not responsible for it, but just out of the goodness of their hearts, help us to create resources for them. So to answer your question there, yes, we do have to teach in addition to interpret, because if they don't understand, if I'm signing something, if I sign a word, for example, colonization, I sign colonization, but they don't know what that is. So when they see the sign, and it's like, what you talking about? So now we have to make sure that they understand these concepts, because even if they see the word and they don't know it, it really doesn't matter because they wouldn't understand.
Well, I understand what you're saying because, secondary school, those 13 subjects or so, they come with their own set of vocabulary, new vocabulary.
Yeah.
And these students will be operating at a disadvantage because the general grammar, and then they have to learn this whole, new set of things.
Yeah.
So you're talking about them going to the school for the deaf?
Yeah.
Or you're talking about they being in mainstream school?
Okay, so they're going to the school for the deaf. Even at the school for the deaf, they don't have the government where it's say in the curriculum you have sign language classes.
Right.
So from the deaf school, they don't have that structure of the language formally. And then they come into secondary school in the mainstream settings, and again, they don't have the language there formally. So you see on the curriculum there is Spanish and French, but there is no sign language. In Cascade, you see on the curriculum, Cascade or Audrey Jeffers or any other school for the deaf, you see on the curriculum language arts, no sign language. So they go through the structure of the English language, but not the structure and the culture that comes with their own language, sign language.
Right. That's culture. So how do you prepare for interpreting in different subject areas? Remember we mentioned the 13 subject areas.
Yes,
like drawing. What subjects that they do apart from language arts and mathematics? in
Okay,
secondary.
so well, I was out with the Form 1 because from Form 3 they will select
Yes.
that will come. So in Form 1 they have maths, English, biology, chemistry, physics, tech ed, that will be like building
Yes.
technology, mechanical drawings. Um, they have art, or well, VAPA, which is drama, art, and they would also have physical education. I'm missing social studies.
Dance and music.
Yes, well, no dance, but they have
Music.
music also. So they don't on Spanish too, but they don't do Spanish, and they don't usually do music. But we did have a couple students who would have passed through the system doing music, but they didn't really like it because they are deaf students who play pan. So, you try not to limit them.
Okay.
So yeah, so they do those subjects, and then the Form 5s who I have now doing well, maths, English, social studies, PE, clothing and textiles, and social studies, office administration, and EDPM.
So how do you interpret for those subjects?
Right. So as you asked about preparation, so I have to go
Yeah.
back to school because when I started, I have to be like a teacher and go back to all the different chapters before the classes. And apart
Uh-huh.
from me understanding what I have to interpret, I also have to get the vocabulary. So I would have to be in research mode a lot. So we come with our job, we have to be researching science, visual aids, researching videos, researching local science, international science, and try to prepare them as much as possible before going into sessions. However, as ideal as that sounds and simple as it enough looks, we don't have that opportunity most times because we don't have access to teachers' lesson plans,
I was
which,
going to ask that.
yeah,
Team
so
of
that
work
is a
and
real
lesson
big,
plans.
yeah,
So
that's
then
a
how do you
real big problem.
prepare? How do you
Well, right.
prepare?
So that's why I was saying that we are guided by our senior special education officer because she has been there for donkey years. She herself being a teacher before that, she kind of understand, okay, this is what, even though the curriculum is set, the teachers will put it in different orders. But because she have worked with these particular teachers in so many years, and she
Mhm.
have a good relationship with them, she would kind of have an idea of what will be coming next so we could prepare for that in advance. But usually we don't have that opportunity. So when that don't happen,
Mhm.
we would then have to do the, even though they were in the classroom. So let's say they were doing something with let's say they were doing social studies, and perhaps the topic for that day was colonization. So we would have to now, even though it's just taught in the class and she gave notes, we have to go back and find the pictures and find the signs and go through the signs with them, and then go through the notes. So where we would have had, if it is we had the lesson plan before, we could have done some pre-teaching so that they would have gone into the sessions with the vocabulary ready.
Mhm.
We have to do it, we have to do kind of like double work. So because I have been there for 4 years, I know exactly, well, not exactly, but most likely what's coming next,
Comment
especially
next.
with COVID. That wasn't such a bad thing because the Google Classroom was there and teachers were posting their notes. So I was able to save some of those for this coming term here because they would usually teach the same thing.
Yeah.
So those things were helpful. However, for a new interpreter now coming into the system, there is not much preparation that can be done for a specific topic. What they will have to do now is use the textbook and just each chapter, go through the chapters, research the signs, research pictures and videos, which could be used to help the student.
Okay, okay. So, I'm moving on now to cultural and linguistic considerations. So, you want to take a break?
Go ahead.
I just know it. Somebody left a phone on my bed and it's going off. It just
All right.
stopped back for itself. So let me just stop it.
No problem.
I'll just cut that out. Oh.
Yeah, yes, no problem.
All right, so now we are moving on to the cultural and linguistic considerations. So in the context of Trinidad and Tobago's multicultural society, how do cultural differences influence your role as a sign language interpreter?
Okay, big question there.
Yeah.
So just like and even in English language, we have right here in Trinidad and Tobago, when we small, we have cultural differences in the north and the south and the east and the west.
Yeah.
Same with the deaf language. There are those cultural differences, and as a sign language interpreter, I have to be culturally competent and up to date with the different nuances and norms, because especially in English language subject, when they are going through literary devices and they're talking about metaphors and similes and onomatopoeia, all of these different things, it's completely different in the two languages. So a metaphor used in English or idiom is completely different to the deaf culture. So in the class, while the teacher is interpreting, teaching, they might make reference to an idiom or a metaphor. Now, I could sign exactly what the teacher says in English, so say it word for word, and that will completely fly over the deaf person's head. So now what I have to do, I can't use the English metaphor in that situation. I have to use a metaphor idiom that is relevant to the deaf language and the deaf culture for them to understand what the teacher is saying. So that is where interpreters will now have to dive into their skill set, not so much your signing, but your language, your cultural competency, because the purpose of the session really is not for them to just know that particular metaphor, but really to understand what is a metaphor, what does it do when you're writing an essay, what is the purpose of the metaphor. So our as interpreters, our primary focus is really to interpret the message. So even though the let me say crap will smoke your pipe or something like that, it's not very relevant to the deaf culture. So that's not something that they would see, but they would sign something with something like similar. So I have to be able to understand the cultural differences in order to faithfully and accurately interpret messages between both parties.
Amazing. So now we will move on to the personal impact and growth. How has working as a sign language interpreter impacted your perceptions of accessibility and inclusion in education?
Well, before getting into this particular field, I really thought that I didn't realize that we had so many limitations and so much holes within the education system. And, even though our national language anthem says, every creed and race and equal place, I guess when you get into the education system, you see it's not so much like that, even though we would like it to be like that. So I see where there are a lot of needs and holes, but working with, because even when I work with deaf students, I work with a lot of different students who are in the space within the school, and I would have been exposed to many, many other different students with special needs, or people, I should say. And because I was able to have access or the opportunity to interact and learn from different people, I believe that my perspective now is a lot more open-minded, and I could see that the world is a lot bigger than I always knew the world was bigger than me, but I could see clearly now. And because I am aware of the different needs that they are out there, or the diversity of people, I appreciate people more. And because of that, I have had the opportunity to work on my emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills, people skills. So because of all of these interactions and diving into this new world, I have seen the growth in myself personally and then professionally. Oh, you're muted.
So what has been the most rewarding aspect of your work as an interpreter, particularly in helping students succeed in their education?
The most rewarding thing for me is just being able to be that communication bridge where you're bridging worlds. Because without the interpreters, teachers cannot get to the students, students cannot get to the teachers. And even though our roles are overlooked, it is so critical because you are the eyes and you are the mouthpiece of the deaf student, and you're also the mouthpiece of the teacher. So you are like the enabler there. And it's it's a great privilege and great responsibility, and also very humbling to be able to be that particular person to bridge the two worlds. And so though we appreciate diversity and uniqueness, there is an importance for being united, and that is where interpreters come in, where they unite worlds. And I feel greatly rewarded when I could see a child light up, or when they raise their hand and the teacher could say, yes, you could answer this question. And they sign whatever it is, whether it's wrong or it's right, and they feel fulfilled, they feel a part, and they feel included. Or the teacher call them up and say, come on the board, and they write whatever, and you could see the pride in them. And then after, leaving, when they leave school, just being able to see that you are part of their growth and their development. Because as a sign language interpreter in Trinidad, you're not only just interpreting, but you're really a part of the molding process, because the things that the teachers wouldn't do, you would now have to do. And because we have parents who don't sign, you come like a big sister, a big mommy, all the auntie, all kind of thing in one. As an interpreter, you teach them, you have to get into life skills, all of these things that they would not have access to readily. So knowing that you're giving everything that you probably didn't have growing up in school, passing it on to the student who would now be able to go out there and be independent, which is what we are striving for. Independence. Yeah.
So I was just about to ask if you have interactions with the students' parents as well.
Yes.
Helping, have you had students who are hearing impaired or deaf having parents who are also hearing impaired or deaf?
Okay. So we do have students who are deaf, and their parents are also deaf. And we don't, like in the school settings or the deaf community now, they don't use the term hearing impaired so much, because when they say hearing impaired, it's more like the medical term where there's something wrong with me, where the deaf, they feel as though this is a part of them and they are proud of being called deaf or hard of hearing. So we do have, like currently, we do have a deaf parent and a deaf student. And what we've noticed with when a parent is deaf is
Mhm.
that the deaf side is a little better off in terms of the language because they acquire language earlier than a parent who is hearing with a deaf child. So that's one of the advantages. But sorry, my sinus acting up. But
Yeah.
we do have parents that are deaf and we interact with them. Yeah.
But what, I mean, do you feel like the parents who are hearing with a deaf child between the ages of, well, from birth to 5, what prevents them from, well, I know you mentioned, we don't have ECC schools. Well, what can you suggest that we have ECC CE schools? Let me go slower. What do you suggest that we have ECCE schools in different areas around the country?
Yeah.
Is the prevalence of this high enough for a whole school, or could we integrate the children into a kind of mainstream ECC school to start learning sign language
Yeah.
as well in that school setting, that mainstream school setting?
Excellent question. Now, right now we don't have, unfortunately, research to tell you the exact figures of how many deaf people reside in Trinidad and Tobago, whether it's north, south, east, west. We really don't know the exact figures. So whether it's big enough or not to have a school in a designated area, we can't say for sure. But we are not totally against the idea of mainstreaming because there are benefits. However, if we have children who are deaf in the mainstream school, because we don't really want them isolated either. If
Yeah.
we have them in the mainstream school at ECC, they need to be a teacher who is trained specifically to deal with deaf students and also competent in the language. Because I remember my sister going to a ECC school and a teacher just know how to say the alphabet. All
And
right.
so that didn't work out well for your sister.
No, it didn't.
All
So
right.
it's because the teacher was not equipped to help her.
Yeah. Right. So now we move on to future recommendations. So based on your experiences, what recommendations would you offer to educational institutions to improve, including the Ministry of Education, the support system for students who use sign language in the primary school ECCs, well, if possible, and mainstream secondary schools?
Yes, excellent question. And first, I will start with the kiddies. So at the age between the ages of 0 to 5, where language development is critical, children have access to education the same way a hearing child is able to enroll in a ECC school. A deaf child should not have to be turned away because the principal is saying, I'm sorry, we do have the resources, we teachers not equipped. And secondly, so apart from providing the resources and equipping teachers, we need a lot of sensitization done in
Yeah.
schools because even teachers, they shy away from even wanting to interact with deaf students. And a part of it is really fear because you really don't know how to. And then you see it as a burden. Oh gosh, now I have more work to do. So these negative attitudes or repugnant attitudes we need to have a shift. And that would only come with education through sensitization. So whether or not teachers will be interacting with children with special needs, they need to be sensitized and have at least some basic level of training. Because what we have to this day is that we have children passing through the creeks who have special needs and has never been detected or identified. So we have students up to Form 5, and only recently a teacher identified, hey, this child, like, they have autism, like this child have ADHD. So you're telling me all these years this child formed in standard 1 straight to Form 5, nobody was able to identify something was different with this child.
Yeah.
And that is because our teachers are not equipped to identify, okay, this is something that we need to look for. The teachers who would have identified, this is my experience, who would have identified students in the later stages when they're coming out of school, they are the most seasoned teachers, like the golden age, kind of looking to retire. So they would have had all these years of experience. So they, and they most likely would be stationed in the more senior classes, so upper school. So you have these children passing through the creeks and crevices of the education system, never been identified. And then you see their grades dropping. This is not just deaf students, but all students with special needs. So we need to have training, sensitization, and then for deaf students in particularly, the language needs to be taught in the school as an official language, not just at the deaf schools, but at primary school for hearing children, secondary school for hearing children, just like you do it from Form 1 to Form 2 mandatory. Sign language should be mandatory from Form 1 to 2, or even if it could go down further than that, excellent. But we know that everybody's into languages. But with that way, we can be more inclusive. So, and I mean, we look into a role with inclusion with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And if we really want to say we are not a developing country, but a first, we want to be identified as one of the developed countries, we need to make steps like these. And that way you wouldn't really need interpreters, because everybody know the language more or less. You will have people who will specialize in it, but it will be a lot more easier for deaf persons and even teachers. So we need to have the language, because you see, Trinidad and Tobago sign language, this is our language. This is not like Spanish is somebody else's language as some other countries. This was birthed in this country, and we need to be proud of it, just like how, and it's dying, unfortunately, just like we have our Trinidad English Creole. That is another language that is dying right now. If you Google a class to get into Trinidad Creole, you're not seeing any. And if you don't have any, I mean, patois, there are few classes, but when people tell you you're talking broken English, we are not speaking broken English. Trinidad Creole language have its own rules, its own syntax. So, wham to you, that is a sentence. It's not broken English. It's a language by itself. But because the language, that particular, when people hear talk like that, you're stigmatized and discriminated. We shy away from it, and we're not proud of it. I admire the Jamaicans. They are proud of their Creole language, and we Trinis are not so much. And I see it dying also, because if you look at little ones, a lot of topic here, but I get to the point. The little ones, they are now, because they are connected globally through the internet. Watching Peppa Pig and all kind of thing.
They have
accents. They never went to know. Yeah, they go on. My little cousin, I say he went New York and come back because he talking splitting Yankee. And he said, can I have a candy? It's a sweetie. We are Trinis. Let me get a soda. It's a soft drink or a sweet drink.
It's not only the young children. I find like university level students working people, they have an accent. So according to which part of the country you're talking to somebody, they have an accent.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Where is that coming from?
And it's not a Trinidadian accent they're talking about. It is like they live in America all their life.
Correct.
or somewhere else all their life.
You're correct. So
And
that's causing the language, our Trini Creole language, to dwindle, and unfortunately, Trinidad and Tobago sign language to dwindle because everybody just trying to copy when we have our own original thing here, which we should be preserving. So the languages are endangered. So the language, so to ensure that it doesn't disappear, we need to preserve it and we need to revitalize it by having it in schools round about, because it's ours. If you go to another country, they can't claim it. So we need to recognize it as an official language. Currently, to this date, the government has not recognized Trinidad and Tobago Sign Language as an official language, hence the reason why it is not in our curriculums. So that is the first thing that needs to be done, recognition of the language. Secondly, a lot of sensitization and education training for teachers, the public, and we need to allow our infants to have access to education as early as 1 year or before that. And then we need to have more support programs for parents. And and we also need to have language assessments, sign language assessments for deaf students. So just like we do SC and we have language arts and creative writing, when we go into secondary school, our teachers, based on the grades, have an idea where this child is in their development and their language competency. Deaf students need to be evaluated and assessed in their language. We need to be able to assess their comprehension, receptive skills, expressive skills, language production. So how many signs they know in the different categories that they know, and the syntax and the grammar and the structure of the language. We need to know these things because in school, like in secondary school, when they come in, we will give them an informal assessment. We cannot go down and say we give them an assessment. We don't have no tools, we don't have no money or resources for that. So we have to informally do these things. So the government needs to invest in those resources. They are expensive. And I certainly don't think that they would expect teachers or interpreters to put out the kind of money to get those resources with the big salary that we have. So yeah, so they need to start really invested. Like when you look at the budget, you see all this money pushed into education, but it is not being distributed at it don't have to be equally, but it is not equitable, I should say.
Yeah.
So we need to work on those areas, and if we do, and we're not isolated, it's just like my department, and we work in unison. I do believe that Trinidad and Tobago would be like a beacon or the education hub for people with special needs. We could be the place where they go to, where everybody want to go to America. People could want to say, hey, I want to go to Trinidad and Tobago because, or the University of the West Indies, because they are for full inclusion and accessibility. So we will also have all that brain drain that we have, and people go to school for all these years and then they fly out and they never come back. We need to have that. I mean, I know the government trying now to encourage or foster national pride and patriotism, but if we are not appreciating our own languages, how far can we go?
And if we are not taking care of all of our people,
that's right.
How far can we go?
That's correct. Right? So that's my conclusion.
So, Ms. Latisha Street, I want to thank you on behalf of Ms. Bastian and myself for sharing this time with us to edify us about, being an interpreter in the education system in Trinidad and Tobago, and how you came into being, and you seem to really enjoy what you do.
Yes, definitely.
Very fulfilling to you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
You're most welcome. My pleasure.